Hello. This week we are tackling both Chapter 8 and Chapter 9, and there will be a quiz on Thursday. So let's get started. Chapter 8 is all about picking a topic and picking one that not only that you're interested in, but your audience will be as well. We will start looking at informative topics and get going on our first big speech. Okay, so this chapter covers how to pick a topic, how to customize your purpose to the speech, and how to analyze that topic so that it also makes it intriguing and interesting for your audience. So, when choosing a topic for public speaking, you need to consider some of these things to help you come up with an idea. You might just kind of think of things that you're comfortable with, already know something about, do some general brainstorming. Definitely look at current events and newspapers and things like that. Even social media or TED Talks are a great way. And then obviously, you're going to do some internet searching to help you solidify what topic you're going to go with. So, when picking an appropriate topic, keep some of this in mind. Is it something your listeners, your audience is going to want to know more about? Will the audience see some sort of connection between the topic and with you? Will that topic meet the objectives of the assignment, which is obviously important because you're getting graded? Do you have Will the audience have enough background? I mean, obviously you're going to have a little bit of background, but do they have enough background to understand what you're talking about? How can you break it down and make it relatable for them? And obviously, you have to be interested in this topic because you're going to be working with it for several weeks. And if you have a little bit of background with it, then that's going to make it a little bit easier to also research it. So choose something that's meaningful to both you and your audience. Choose a topic that allows you to convey the important information that's relevant. And then also pick something that you're a little bit familiar with or something that you are genuinely interested in. And then think about the audience as well when you're picking that topic. Okay, so every speech has basically three general purposes, three overall goals. The first two speeches that we're going to be doing is the informative speech, a slightly different, we're going to focus more on current events with the second one. But the main goal of an informative speech is to teach, to share knowledge, to make something interesting and more understandable. Now, the persuasive speech, which will be our final speech, you are focusing on convincing your audience to change a belief system or maybe actions. And then there's also entertainment speeches or speeches to suit special occasions, like maybe a graduation speech or a best man speech at a wedding. Okay, so the specific purpose then is going to narrow down a little bit more of the direction that your speech is going to go, and it will help you plan what your main points are going to be and things like that, but it's not something that's literally in the speech. Now, the thesis statement it's going to be in your introduction. So in a speech introduction, we have an attention getter, then a credibility statement, which I'll explain more later, followed by the thesis statement. The last part of an intro in a speech is usually your preview, where you tell them what the main points are going to be. So here's an example. Maybe you want to do something with renewable energy. So your general purpose for this first speech is going to be to inform. So you got to narrow it down. You can't just talk about renewable energy as a whole. That's way too broad. So you're going to inform your audience about wind as a possible energy source. And then you'll come up with a thesis statement there. My image here is blocking that, but wind is an inexpensive, easily accessible, renewable energy source would be the thesis statement for that. Okay, you also have to think about your audience. What are they going to get out of this? And how do you make it interesting for them? So you always need to keep the audience in mind. Keep in mind that there's two types of audience, captive and voluntary. Voluntary is where you choose to go to something. Obviously, this is a speech class, you're being graded, so your audience is captive, but you still want to make it interesting for them. So you should always consider the demographics of your audience, their background. Demographics are things you can measure, whereas psychological analysis is getting a little bit deeper into values, beliefs, and attitudes. That probably comes into play a little bit more with the persuasive speech. You can do surveys, interviews, questionnaires, things like that to get a better understanding of your audience too, if you want. For instance, maybe you're doing a speech on distracted driving, and you could poll your audience to find how many students in our class admit to driving distracted. Okay, so how to pick an informative topic, because that's what we're going to do next. You obviously need to pick something you're interested in and something that you think your audience will also be interested in learning a little bit more about. So there's some do's and don'ts. Avoid these topics. So don't pick something that's too simple, like you'd be talking down to them, something that might be more appropriate for like a junior high speech, but also don't pick something that's too broad or too complex that there's no way you can cover that in a 4-minute speech. Because this is an informative speech, do not pick anything that's overtly political or overly controversial. Some of those topics will work well for a persuasive speech. Don't pick something that's too problematic or persuasive. Again, we'll save that for the end of the semester. Make sure you pick something that you can find research on, and you have to find most of your research through the library databases. So we need to find newspapers and magazine articles, not just websites. And then you can't pick something that you've already done a major paper on, even a speech in high school on. You got to pick something new, make it fresh. Okay, so you also, when you're picking a topic, you got to think, what could my main points be for this speech? You have to keep that in mind, otherwise, it might not be a good topic. So maybe you want to do a speech on chocolate. Possible main points could be, what's the history of chocolate? How was it discovered? How did it grow in popularity? You could talk about the different kinds of chocolate. And then you could do one on the health benefits, especially dark chocolate has a lot of health benefits. Medical topics make great informative speeches. So you could talk about the causes of diabetes or even the types of diabetes, but you could focus on just type 1 diabetes, for instance. What are some of the symptoms? How does it get diagnosed? And then treatment. Another possible topic could be something as familiar as acne. What are some of the kinds of acne and breakouts? What are some of the myths that really aren't true? And how can we treat acne or prevent it? And then artificial intelligence. How does it work? What are some ways that it's being used in our everyday lives right now? And what are some of the future implications? We kind of get into some ethics and some scary things there. Okay, so it's time to get started. You need to look at the new module that I just posted under informative speech number 1 and start looking at some of those topics. You are not limited to the topics I have on that sheet. It's just meant to be kind of a starting point. So look at some of those topics, maybe do a quick Google to see if it's something that you might be interested in, but ultimately you're going to have to run those topics by me and get approval. Okay? That's it for chapter 8. I will upload the video for this and then get started on chapter 9 as well. Okay, let me get this closed up and more information to come.